Welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared, and today we brought Wes back from Thinking Critical. Wes, welcome back to Under Two Capes.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Love talking comic books.
So today's topic, and it was one that I've been wondering ever since Death of the Justice League was announced. It's like, has death lost its meaning in comics? And what I mean by that, because immediately when they announced it, everyone was like, yeah, so we know they're going to come back. So my question to you, Wes, is, has death been made meaningless in comics? And how would you make it meaningful?
Well, depending on how you look at it from a consumer perspective, when you read Justice League 75, the Death of the Justice League, they're not dead.
Mm-hmm.
But from the publisher standpoint, it's probably still effective because as far as I can tell, what I've been told from my friends that are retailers, they sold out. So even though people know that the deaths really are meaningless and they're leading into an event it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of enthusiasm for, just putting on that they were going to kill off the Justice League was effective in the fact that in that they made money. So I guess it kind of depends on how you look at it, but it's a gimmick. It's a marketing gimmick now. It doesn't really serve any story purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't for a really long time. There's only a few characters that have died that really stayed dead. Gwen Stacy, kind of.
Yeah.
Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we even got Thunderbird back.
Mm-hmm. It's like they Superman was the first one they died and then brought back later. Then you had also characters like Batman who died and came back in the most convoluted way of all time. Thank you, Grant Morrison. But it's kind of funny. We've had individual Justice League members die before, but we've never had the entire team get wiped out. So I guess that could kind of explain why it's it's selling really well, because of the collectors and such that are like, oh, it's the first time the Justice League gets team wiped. Yes, I have to have this.
Well, it's a speculator's market for the most part. That's kind of what DC, specifically right now, which has been a really big change for DC as a publisher, is that they are catering to the speculator market. They used to only do an A and a B cover, really. And if it was a number one issue or a milestone, of course, they would have more cover offerings. But you go through their solicitations now, everything has multiple covers now. And I'm sure they had some cool covers for Death of the Justice League besides the one that just says Death of the Justice League, because you wouldn't want to be subtle about these things. You've got to let everyone know that it happens. But what is interesting about Justice League 75, if we want to talk about that one, is we do see, they're going after Pariah, and he essentially melts the faces off of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, the Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
Very much, you're supposed to feel like you're reading Infinite or Crisis on Infinite Earths when Barry Allen dies. This is exactly what happens. But before that, before Pariah, I mean, he didn't kill him. I mean, he sent him to another dimension or something. But before that, we did see Green Arrow die. Oliver Queen dies.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing when I was taking a look at it. I'm like, wait, what?
So if they wanted to make it meaningful, I guess you would just have to say Oliver Queen is no more, and we're never going to have a Green Arrow back, or at least with Oliver Queen in the mantle, maybe.
Yeah, well, but yeah, I said this on a YouTube comment once, and I was like, yeah, I guarantee you, when they bring them back inevitably at the end of this event, it'll be like they weren't actually dead. We thought they were. They were just teleported to a holding cell so Pariah could do whatever he wanted to do.
In purgatory or something.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, there's no way, even if they're going to bring it back, that they're going to kill their most popular characters, because we all know Marvel tried that and it didn't exactly work out for them.
Nah, Marvel killed off Tony Stark.
Yeah, I know.
Steve Rogers, they killed off Wolverine. They're all dead at the same time. This is really stupid.
It's really stupid because it's really stupid because it's like DC keeps trying to copy Marvel, and I understand you want to copy the industry leader, but they keep copying the things that didn't work well, like replacing all of your important heroes with D tier replacements, arbitrarily changing characteristics of the character, and I'm like, why are you copying this?
They're trying to do it a little bit different. I will give them a slight bit of credit here, because Batman, the series is still going on. Clark Kent's still on Warworld and Action Comics, and Wonder Woman's still going to have her own comic. So, but it sends such a mixed signal. Like, you kill the Justice League, but they're not really dead.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost saying, you know, I dare you not to read it. You know, it doesn't matter. They're not really dead. You can still go read the characters that you like. You know, it's just the Justice League that's not around. It's like, well, the Justice League sucked anyway because Brian Michael Bendis was writing it.
Yeah, exactly. But the only good part about Bendis's Justice League runs when it started, they had Snyder cut variant covers that I have hanging on my wall. But anyway, so another point is that I think they're going to use Dark Crisis, and so what they're going to do is they replace the individual JL members with like their kids or their derivative characters. I think the way they're going to bring them back is those derivative characters are not going to be able to fight Pariah and beat him. Then all of a sudden the real Justice League are going to come back and go, oh, okay, we got this.
Yeah. The regular team will go to fight Pariah and it will not be going well. But somebody will be sent to go and find the other Justice League, or there'll be a hint and they'll go on a side quest. And are they going to free him in time? And then you'll see the Justice League they wish that we would buy met up with the real Justice League, you know, hopefully to, well, not hopefully, so they could win the day.
How much you want to bet? Like, they'll make it so Batman had some kind of contingency plan for if he was ever killed and brought back because it's Batman.
Yeah, well, it feels like it's in Grant Morrison's character, the version of the character.
Yeah, but another thing I want to talk about. So, in terms of Dark Crisis, and I made a video about this, which Wes, I want to tell you, I got backlash for that one. So I made a video saying DC needs a reboot and they should use Dark Crisis to like reboot their continuity, hard reboot, like Flashpoint style, because at this point they really just have to start off at square one because there's so many contradictions. This omniverse thing is the worst thing I think they've ever done in terms of the worst things in my memories, because Lord knows they've done worse. But so my point in the video was I think they're going to use this to like wipe the slate clean of all the stuff that didn't work out. What do you think?
I don't think they're going to go that far. I mean, there's a lot of transition going on. I think they're going to use it to do something. But I don't think that they're just going to do a hard reboot, like even like a Rebirth was, or New 52, where it's like at this moment on, you know, the game has changed. These are the new rules that we're going to play under. I don't imagine the Omniverse is going anywhere anytime soon. It'll go somewhere because it does suck so bad. But they do need something. The problem is the time frame in between all these reboots just keeps contracting. It's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And when you do a hard reboot like that, you do have to have not only fans that want to continue to support DC Comics, but they also like trust you. And I think at this point, you know, obviously some fans will never give up, and I appreciate that. You know, I say stick around and support the comics that you do want. But I think once you just continuously go back to this gimmick, storytelling gimmick, so you can write your own universe because you keep messing it up all the time. Like what's going to happen? Rebirth was great. I think people like those versions of characters. It looked like it was going in a good direction. 18 months later, it was dead. The sales were there. People liked those versions of the characters. It's not like there wasn't enthusiasm and support for what DC Rebirth was, and they still messed it up.
Yeah.
And this will be the second crisis since Rebirth. Rebirth wasn't all that long ago. It was like 6 or 7 years ago. And if you could consider Dark Knight's Metal to be a crisis in itself, I think Death Metal is more of a crisis.
Yeah, Death Metal is definitely more. Even if they didn't label it, I'm like, yeah, it's a crisis, bro.
Yeah, then you get to Dark Crisis, like, why even try?
Now, my question for you is, you said that they should change a few things. What do you think they should change in the continuity to make it a little more cohesive?
They need to get rid of the Omniverse. They need to embrace Elseworlds and what it is. Elseworlds needs to be its own thing, even if it's popular.
Yeah.
Just because, you know, you have a really popular Alan Moore Joker story, you know, where certain things happen, obviously, to Barbara Gordon.
Yeah.
Just because that story was popular doesn't mean it needs to be in canon.
No.
You can leave things out there as Elseworlds. And that's kind of one of the things that DC has done in the past so much better than Marvel. It's like, I like their What If comics, but Elseworlds were like, you kind of took them serious. Yeah. They weren't kind of like parody comics, which a lot of times Marvel's What If are.
Yeah, I kind of.
not leaving Elseworlds to be its own thing and creating the multiverse of Elseworlds. It's like, get out of here. Just have some Elseworlds, tell some stories that don't exactly realign with canon, where you take some liberties here there to tell a story that's a little bit different than the way you would like to portray the character, within the main continuity, and differentiate it. But everything's so muddy right now, you don't even know what's going on.
I think what they'll do is they won't like outright say we're going to destroy the Omniverse. They'll just stop referencing it, and then they'll just say, okay, ignore that. We're going to do this. And I definitely agree with you that DC definitely has to embrace the Elseworlds, because let's face it, that's one of their competitive advantages to Marvel, because like you said, their Elseworld stories are way better than What If. I mean, we have like, for a time, we have like Watchmen, kind of. We have The Killing Joke. We have, at the moment, 3 Jokers. But it's like some of DC's greatest storylines of all time are Elseworld stories, not even in the main canon.
Yeah, it looks like a Red Sun.
Yes.
That's a really interesting story, but I would never want to see that to be the real Superman.
No.
That's not cool. Obviously, they've kind of done that with Superman here and there in the regular continuity, but people need to differentiate and say this is Elseworlds and this is what it means. It means even if you love this story, you can continue to love it, and if you support it, we'll do a sequel to it.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's never really going to go in there and affect the canon. And I think that's, you need to have good, solid structure and like rules on what's affecting what. And otherwise you kind of get this weird, I don't know, what is DC Comics, like a weird porridge right now? Or you just got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And you're like, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah, and it's like we said on our last episode, they actually have to have an editorial team that's actually willing to say no to people, because I feel like a lot of the problems with DC is that their editorial won't say no to the talent, like say, no, you can't do this. It's not consistent with these characters. And that leads to really, really bad storylines like Brian Michael Bendis' entire Superman run, or Tom King doing The Flash in Heroes in Crisis.
Yeah, those are the dark times. I guess we're still in it. There's some really bad stuff. Like, did you read Teen Titans Academy? Ugh, that's rough, man.
I will say, speaking of Bendis, I was on a stream with Nerdist Newsstand. I said, if they do clean up one thing, I want them to use this as a sort of pseudo reboot to eliminate anything Brian Michael Bendis has done at DC. Because let's face it, it hasn't exactly been his best work.
Nah, I don't think he was a fit for DC.
No.
But he's a Marvel guy through and through. And even at that, I know he had a health scare. Those things can kind of change who you are and your ability to really do a lot of output. He was putting out a lot of comics at DC, but even at the end of his time at Marvel, he hadn't really written a hit comic book that people thought was good in a long time,
Yeah, because
Civil War 2 was,
you know
what I mean?
Oh my, Civil War 2, that thing still exists. It's like, I'm like, this is like the most disappointing sequel to one of the greatest Marvel comic books of all time. And trust me, I've read some disappointing sequels.
Yeah, one of the problems for Bendis, I don't want to trash the guy. From everything I've been told, he's super duper nice, and obviously he's influenced, comic books a ton. He's probably the most, as far as what you're reading now, I would say that, Bendis is the most influential creator that has influenced this generation in the stories that we're getting. But the problem is he's kind of stuck with the same tropes that he was using before, but he's not quite as sharp as he was before. But you have all these creators that were influenced by him, so they're using his tropes as well, but they're doing them better. So it kind of shines a light on all the stuff that he wasn't really getting right to begin with, and making it seem a whole lot worse. Like a lot of times when you read a Bendis comic, especially a DC, I would say 2/3 of the comic book is a recap of the previous comic.
Yeah,
it's like, I appreciate a recap, but you do that in a page or two, and then you move on with the story.
Yeah,
and there was never any advancement. Like, the story just sits there.
Plus the fact, here's where I think he was a better fit for Marvel. Marvel is a little bit looser than DC, I feel like, with their continuity, so you can do more of whatever you want. With DC, at least in terms of the fans, they're very protective of what happens in the continuity, and you can't have anything that contradicts. And I think that was a learning curve for Bendis, and he probably couldn't do it. That's why he left DC.
Well, and also kind of pairing him up with a character like Superman was a bad idea. Like that's like a paragon of virtue. It's like one of the most hopeful characters in the entire comic book universe. And what is Bendis really, one of his trading cards as a writer is, showing the darker aspects of a character, how they're wrong and how all that stuff plays out. And it's like, it doesn't really work with Superman. So you're putting all these things in there and they're just completely rejected. It never really fit the character. He should have been doing something. He would have done like probably a pretty cool like Red Hood story. I think a lot of people just expected him to be writing Batman, but there's plenty of stuff. Really, the character he should have been writing was Green Arrow.
Yes.
Oliver Queen and Brian Michael Bendis would really make sense together.
Or maybe Damian Wayne.
I don't like Bendis doing younger characters. He cannot write.
I
don't know if I want more Bendis speak, but I get what you're saying.
Knowing Bendis, he'll age Damian up, and and then he'll be better. But I agree with you. He should have been on a street level character because let's face it, the reason why he was another reason why he was good at Marvel is most of their characters are street level at best, and whenever he did like Avengers, most of those characters were the street level characters. So really, he excels when he's writing not godlike characters. Like I wouldn't want to read a Bendis Thor run.
Nah, but Bendis Daredevil.
Yes. Oh heck yes. He would also have done a good I'd say Batwoman maybe.
Oh yeah, he could have done a lot of stuff like within the Bat family. You think there's so many different characters, like a Huntress with the Brian Michael Bendis. That would seem like it would be a good fit, but Superman was just an odd fit. And then he tried to spin it off into that Leviathan thing, and that was one of the most poorly paced stories I've ever read. Nobody was buying it there. By the end, they decided to do a sequel anyway. It's like, what are you doing here? And obviously, he brought in a lot of people. From Marvel kind of along with them, with your Kelly Sue DeConnick, your Matt Fractions and whatnot. And I don't think really any of that stuff worked out.
No, we all know what happened with Kelly Sue DeConnick and Aquaman. Geez.
Yeah, it dropped like 20% of sales on her first issue. It just continued to drop until she left.
I mean, I was watching all your summaries on it, and then this is during the time when I had just gotten into reading Dan Abnett's Aquaman one from the beginning of Rebirth, and I'm like, why could they do this? Why could they do this?
It's too bad is that, Dan Abnett's Aquaman wasn't like a top 10 seller because it's Aquaman. It'd be very difficult. I don't even think Jeff Johns' Aquaman, which is really good, sold that well. But for an Aquaman run that was at the issue, up to issue, I think it was in the 30s, like it was still over 40,000. Like it was still selling pretty well for Aquaman. And Abnett did a lot of good stuff. Abnett's another writer that he's really good with female characters. I think he was certainly doing his best to kind of highlight and accentuate Mira and stuff like that. And I think it really worked out. But I mean, Aquaman's he's a dead character now. This next series that they're on now, it's going to end on issue number 6. And it wasn't, it was solicited as an ongoing. They just destroyed any interest in Aquaman.
Yeah, because who would have thought that replacing him with another character that's unlikable would be Cancer. And my problem, and you actually brought this up in a video, is that why are they creating Jackson Hyde to replace him as Aquaman when you have Calder?
There's something weird that happened there, like behind the scenes. As far as I believe, Calder was created first, but because it takes a lot longer to do an animated series, in the meantime, they kind of took what Calder was and they made Jackson Hyde and debuted him in the comics first. It was something really strange. Yeah, I've heard some reports on it. But Calder, people didn't even know the sexuality of the character for seasons. Yeah, even though when the character was created from Greg Weisman, the character was gay, but they never really got into that point. Not because it wasn't important, but because they knew. Initially, you had to build the character up, flesh the character out, and make people really respond to the hero. And then you could go in and kind of add even more layers to them that were planned to be there from the beginning. And I mean, what have they done with Jackson Hyde?
I know.
Nothing.
That's my problem, and this is what I always tell people. It's fine to like do all this stuff with characters. I get that, but the problem is that the way mainstream comics does it is that they change a certain part of a character, or they'll put in a new part of the character, like they'll have them come out as gay or they'll gender bend them. But what they do is that they don't do anything with that character afterwards that is significant enough to make people become attached to that character, and then it doesn't sell well.
Yeah, especially when you do the mantle swaps, you're kind of just setting the character up for failure, especially if the character they're replacing is still alive. Mantle swaps can work. You think about Wally West coming in as the Flash, or Kyle Rayner taking over as Green Lantern, but Barry Allen and Hal Jordan were dead. Like those characters ascended to the mantle, they were accepted, and they were the heroes for decades before they did the return. As you mentioned earlier, death means nothing, because when you do a Flash rebirth or a Green Lantern rebirth, and I love both those stories. I don't want to get people thinking the wrong thing on there, but there's money to be had on the return of the character, even if the original plan was they were going to be dead forever. Well, obviously they found that out with Jason Todd and coming back as Red Hood, and he was a herring, and was it Red Herring in Rush or Hush?
Yeah. I also think the reason why I think Kyle and Wally were popular also is because they made them different from who was in the costume beforehand. Like, take for instance Kyle Rayner. He had more elaborate like constructs. His costume looked different. He acted different than Hal Jordan, and that's why I think the other thing is that they have to make these characters more unique and not just say Superman, who's also bisexual and young. They have to be able to create unique characters too, because otherwise it just looks like a ripoff. That's why I think one of the best new-ish characters that was established in the New 52 is Jessica Cruz Green Lantern, because they established her and did something new with the Green Lantern Corps and had her be constantly afraid. Thank you, Jeff Johns.
Well, yeah, and there's like a self-doubt and stuff like that. You would have seen the same thing with Wally West. Am I good enough to replace Barry Allen? He's my hero. I looked up to him forever. Kyle Rayner obviously is a different spin on the character, but if you see something now like Riri Williams, when did you ever get the impression that she was like, oh my goodness, I'm replacing Tony Stark? Am I even good enough for this? It's like, no, the writer made the character unlikable and essentially say, you know what, I'm better than Tony Stark ever was from day one anyway. It was like,
exactly. Or it's like with John Kent's Superman. He straight up told his father that he sucked at being Superman.
Yeah, you didn't do anything. Why didn't you help out more? It's like, I don't know, man. He saved the universe quite a few times.
Did you read Death Metal?
But you read stuff like that, and it just turns you off to the character, and not only the character, but really to the writer. You see, then you're like, this is the Tom Taylor I remember from X-Men Red, and all new Wolverine and everything else that he messed up at Marvel. Apparently, he can only do Elseworld stories.
That's what I was going to say, because here's the thing. Tom Taylor excels when he doesn't have continuity. That's why I think, because look at his most famous storylines. Injustice and Deceased. Dark Knights of Steel I've heard is pretty good, but there are some parts of it that suck. But my point is that most of his good stuff is Elseworlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he doesn't really do much in continuity. He becomes a really lazy writer. Yeah. And he just turns to the laziest tropes ever. That's one of the reasons. I mean, Superman's not at worldwide coverage for that Superman Son of Kal-El series, and the sales aren't there. Not surprising.
Yeah, I got into an argument with someone about how it's not selling well, and their excuse was it's in like the top 100 spot, but it's at 58. I'm like, a Superman title should not be at 58. Okay.
When Brian Michael Bendis was writing Superman in Action Comics, and everyone thought that Brian Michael Bendis was a terrible writer there, every issue was in the top 50.
Yeah.
Before that, when Tomasi was on Superman and Jurgens was on Action Comics, the same story.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of damage to Superman, and he's not even selling. And there's too much reliance on Batman. There's a lot of weird stuff going on at DC. They really need to, kind of hope that Zaslav does something when he's taken over and really we get a better DC Comics universe. I think that's what everyone wants.
So far, he has, because he canceled all the bad CW shows pretty much. All he has to do is get rid of Flash, and then we're good to go. But so I have high hopes for that. So my last point that I'll say before I let you go is, in terms of how do you predict that that DC is going to handle like Dark Crisis and the sort of reboot, and that they repair a few things? Because I do have faith in Joshua Williamson, because I think he's a fantastic writer. I don't know what you think.
I think Williamson's a really solid writer. He does a lot of good work. I do think he's doing too much work.
That's true.
And you can even see it kind of right now with his Shadow War event. You can, it's kind of meandering a little bit, and the dialogue's, I don't know, just not very good. It's not really Josh Williamson. You can see he's writing too much. Hopefully he gets to put a lot of emphasis on Dark Crisis, but this thing really blew up. You know, I think it's going to be like 24 issues or something total for, until the end of the year. So I guess we'll see what happens. Like I said, I think we'll see this. We'll have this huge Justice League that gets defeated. John Kent and Jackson Hyde will be the only ones that save, and then the new Justice League with the other members we've been talking about for a while will go out there to take on Pariah, and then somebody will be on a side quest to bring back the real Justice League. What happens after that? I don't know, man. I'm sure they're going to use it as an opportunity to reboot some stuff. And maybe introduce some new titles, but what are they going to do? Like a Jackson Hyde Aquaman? That's not going to work. It just failed already. They're going to do a Yara 4 Wonder Girl. That thing already failed. Are they going to do a Joe Mullins Green Lantern? Everybody's waiting for Hal Jordan. You know what I mean?
Or the Hal Jordan they recognize, because the current Green Lantern with Hal Jordan is getting kind of crazy. But I will say, I have one prediction, is that I think one of the new Justice League, the ones that are replacing our Justice League, are going to die in some moderately heroic fashion, so they can give them kind of like a send-off, and that'll be a reboot for that character. Like, I can't see them necessarily killing John Kent, but maybe like one of the like Aqua people or something like that. Man,
it would be the worst idea to kill off Jackson Hyde and then introduce his cousin Calder that everyone forgot about.
I know, and that actually, that's the funny part, because Young Justice is really popular. Why aren't you doing stuff with Calderon?
It's a weird time to be a DC Comics fan. That's the only way to put it. I was talking to Josh. He was working at BatmanNews.com for several years. He's all about DC Comics. Been reading DC Comics for 30 years. I'm like, is this as bad as it's gotten? He's like, yeah, this is as bad as it's gotten.
Yeah.
Because the New 52 was pretty rough there for him. And he's like, nah, the New 52 had a real direction. He's like, whether you liked it or not, the characterization was off, but there were good stories to be read. He goes, there isn't enough of that here. And like, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that thinks so. Sometimes I think I'm maybe a little too harsh on my criticism. But then when you start talking to real fans that have been reading DC Comics, like, nah, it's not just me.
Oh no, trust me. I read a lot of the news about what they're doing with these characters, and I'm like, wait, what? This makes no sense. And this is coming from a guy who's been reading since the New 52. Lord knows a lot of the stuff in that publishing initiative didn't make sense. But I agree with Josh. This is way worse than the New 52.
The 52 had real direction. It had some really good writers, even if it wasn't your favorite version of the character. You still had good writers on them. Good writers make good stories.
Yeah, exactly.
We really don't have a lot of that right now. All the writers just left. We are getting this Jeff Johns Flashpoint Beyond. It sounds like he kind of overviewed it, and some other people came in and finished off the script. But there's no Scott Snyder working right now. There's no Peter Tomasi. There's no Dan Jurgens. There's no Robert Venditti that we can see right now. It's Joshua Williamson, Ram V, obviously, and Chip Zdarsky on Batman and Detective Comics are going to be great. But are we not getting enough Batman? That's the only character we are getting good stories with.
Maybe we can actually get a good Wonder Woman run.
Not with Clunrad.
Not with Cluny, but you know what I'm saying.
Michael Conrad and Becky Cloonan, it's not going to happen. No. I hope you didn't read Trial of the Amazons. It was awful.
No, I didn't. I have no desire to read any of the new stuff coming out from DC, except maybe Dark Crisis, because I like crises and I want to see if they completely wreck these. I call them the dollar store Justice League, because they're cheap impressions of their predecessors. But so actually, one more question real quick. You mentioned a Flashpoint Beyond, and I checked out that book, and it's dealing with a lot of multiverse type stuff. You think that's going to have like big you think that's going to have like any effect on the overall DC multiverse, or you think it's just going to be localized?
This is an interesting question, because in the first issue, it certainly seems like that's what they were hinting at, right? You got the board, talking about the Omniverse, 5G averted, and he's starting to connect the dots, and there's a couple of diagrams and whatnot, and that's what it feels like. But it's certainly hinting at a lot of stuff with Doomsday Clock.
Yes.
And the setup for Doomsday Clock and DC Rebirth, which obviously Jeff Johns was the architect of that, and that was supposed to be the big payoff for Rebirth. Mm-hmm. They were going to go into this stuff, and then Doomsday Clock was going to be the big payoff. So it sounds like he wants to maybe go in there and do a few things there. So I think it'll be mostly dealing with the Flashpoint timeline, delving a little bit into Doomsday Clock. I'm starting to get the hint. I'm pretty sure I'm right on this one. That like that 5G averted and stuff, those were just digs at Dan Didio.
Yeah, I love that.
Or messed up the DC Rebirth and Doomsday Clock so much, and really had messed up Jeff Johns' plans when he was the chief creative officer. As soon as he went up to DC Films, he kind of sabotage is a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's him kind of getting back and tweaking him like, well, I'm still here, and I'm going to talk about how your 5G thing that got you fired, was averted kind of thing.
You're not the only one that thinks that. I've been seeing like 8 different YouTubers that were saying, he's making stabs at Didio.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be bigger than that, though. It felt like they were going to maybe be tackling the issue that is the Omniverse and time, space, and everything that's happening within DC Comics. But I think it was probably more of a low blow than a deep cut that they were going to really get into.
That'd be hilarious if Jeff Johns, the entire purpose of this series is to bash the DC leadership.
Well, hey, Grant Morrison was doing it in his Green Lantern run.
Yeah, that'd be great if like he opens like a window into Earth Prime and he sees the Discount Justice League and he's like, amateurs. That'd be. I would love that. I would buy every copy of that book just so I could read that.
It's nice having something like a Flashpoint Beyond. It's not the greatest story of ever, but it's good. It's enjoyable, and it gives you something else to read from DC that isn't in continuity, because their continuity is so bad. That's the thing that Marvel has right now that is really awesome. Mm-hmm. Are these alternatives where they're doing these 5-issue miniseries that are in continuity 30 years ago. They're bringing like a Peter David back, a Chris Claremont, a J.M. DeMatteis or whatever. And they're writing these stories and they're just great. It's like, hey, I don't even have to deal with the Marvel continuity. This stuff's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Normally your Elseworlds would be your alternative at DC, but they've kind of muddied the waters so much. So it's kind of nice having a Flashpoint series like that.
I agree with you. And Flashpoint's always been a favorite story of mine because you have a gun-toting Batman. Pre-Zack Snyder. So, guys, I think that's a good place to leave it. Drop a comment if you think death has been rendered meaningless in comics. Wes, it's always a pleasure to have you on the channel. You're always welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Jared. I really appreciate it. Love talking comic books, and definitely can't wait to come back on here and discuss some more.
Absolutely, anytime. Hope you guys enjoyed that fantastic interview with Wes from Thinking Critical. I just wanted to put a little more content in this episode, kind of pad it out. So that's really my main point, is that when you keep bringing killing characters and then bringing them back to life, it just cheapens it. That's really ultimately my main point too, and I get the thing also Wes's main point. It also doesn't help when you kill the characters just so you can replace them. But going back to what I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about those two individually mainly. So when it cheapens it, because if you notice, the reaction to like Death of the Justice League was so we know they're going to come back, and then DC announced that they're going to come back, and everyone's like, really? That's it. That's the interesting part here, because I'm like, what? No one cares anymore, because the death of the Justice League, the death of the actual Justice League, and once again, I don't think it's going to be actual death, because as Wes said, they like it looks like they get teleported. And let's face it, we've seen that teleportation effect before in Rebirth. Whenever someone would like be grabbed by, who was it? Mr. Oz, who later turned out to be Jor-El in a very convoluted storyline. So I don't think they're dead. They're like teleported into some holding cells that are like specially designed for them because it's Pariah. But no, it wasn't like when they announced like the death of Superman. Oh my gosh. Well, that was because it was the death of Superman, the first one. But there's not like any hype for the death of the Justice League, and that should tell you that you messed up when you're killing off your main characters, like your Avengers team, your, in a way, biggest sellers, your the face of your universe, and everyone's like, so ultimately, what I think is good. So that's really my main point here, people. It's that it's a little muddled right now, and honestly, I really feel like also this is going to be DC at least walking back a little bit of the things that fans hated from I think it was like Metal and On. I think they're going to get rid of like some of Bendis' stuff. They could even de-age John Kent. But I do feel like they're going to bring back... well, first off, after the series Son of Kal-El, I think that Jonathan Kent is going to go back to being Superboy. I don't... Or they're going to put that in another continuity. That's what they should have done. I feel like they're going to make Superman... make John Kent Superboy. I refuse to call him Superman. He's not Superman. But I feel like they're going to have Kal-El come back, and then he'll be the main Superman again. Then maybe he'll say, I don't want to be Superman anymore. I mean, John Kent. He's like, I can't be Superman because of all this baggage. I don't know how Tom Taylor's can do it. But I think that they'll make him be his own separate character. Because if he says, hey, if this is what Superman's all about, I don't want to be Superman. I think that a lot of these characters are not necessarily going to be like the Aquaman, the Wonder Woman. I think that what they'll do is they'll make them their own unique characters. They may be putting a little too much faith in DC, but at this point, hope is all we have, people. And then my last point is that really, it's DC just really needs to work better. And I feel like also, here's my other point, and this is something I should have talked about with Wes, but with Zaslav. So in that Variety article that came back that I think we talked about on the show, or we didn't, I apologize, but so it was talking about how he wants to make DC its own content vertical, its own independent content thing, like DC Studios or so, independent from Warner Brothers. I think they're going to do is sort of redo the characters to make them more in line with the movies. In other words, they're going to try for, this is a key word in corporate speak, synergy, which means that I get the feeling that we're not going to have multiple Superman books. We're just going to have Clark Kent Superman, Bruce Wayne Batman, Diana Prince Wonder Woman, Barry Allen or Wally West at this point, Flash, et cetera, so that they can say there's some continuity. So that if they're operating under the false assumption that people see a superhero movie and then go right to the comic books, they'll be able to go, okay, so you just saw a Superman story. Here's a Superman comic. People go to their LCS, they see Superman. It's not John Kent. Just leave it alone. There you go. I think that would be a great way to do it. And I feel like that's the way, at least with Zaslav, because I have a little more hope for DC since Zaslav took over, because he's a money guy, and if you're not making money, he will make you make money or shut you down or sell you off or something like that. That's my main point. And let me know what you guys think. Do you have hope in Zaslav? Do you think that DC is at least can use Dark Crisis to maybe change a few things? Do you think Flashpoint Beyond will be a secret like repairing of the DC continuity, or do you think, as we said in the episode, that it's just Jeff Johns making digs at DC leadership? I'd love to find out what you guys think. So drop a comment. Let us know for those of you in the audio, in the description, there's our email address, and you can click there and shoot us an email that way. And hope you guys enjoyed this great episode. I'm glad Wes was able to come back on, and I will see you guys in the next episode. All right, everyone, stay heroic. Bye-bye.